Some mornings start out pretty ordinary. Quiet, unplanned, nothing breaking the usual rhythm. But that morning wasn't ordinary for Mark Webber. He didn't know it yet, but in just a few minutes, a decision would change the course of his life, making him face his past and unexpectedly open a door to a new kind of heart. Mark had gotten up early, like always. He threw on his old t-shirt and worn-out jacket with frayed cuffs. While packing his daughter's lunchbox with one hand, he stirred his first coffee of the day with the other. That 8-year-old little miracle, Lena, was still crunching on her cereal at the kitchen table, swinging her feet from the edge of the chair. She was Mark's whole world, his only pride. Ever since his wife died, life had been like a wildfire. All he wanted was to give his daughter a future, a home, a warm place, an honest life. But most days, neither the home nor the life felt that way. "Did you brush your teeth?" Mark asked, glancing at the clock. Lena grinned with foamy mouth and showed him her teeth. That brought Mark the first smile of the day. That girl reminded him there was still some good left in the world. It was just past 8 o'clock. Mark's fin had been broken for 3 days, so he was walking to work. They set out to drop Lena off at school. The city's morning rush hadn't fully kicked in yet. The streets were crowded, horns honking impatiently, people indifferent. No one noticed a tired-faced dad in a worn jacket and his hopeful little girl. That invisibility was something Mark was used to. Sometimes it acted like a shield. But that morning, the invisibility didn't work. Because when they rounded the corner, the silence was shattered by a screech of metal. Mark turned his head reflexively. First came the sound, then the sight. A huge garbage truck, out of control, barreling downhill with no driver. No brakes. Just a helpless, rolling mass and the panic-filled screams left behind. Right in front of the truck, a woman was walking alone. Her white jacket had broad shoulders, and her steps were determined. She was on the phone with headphones, completely unaware of the disaster coming her way. "Lena, get back!" Mark shouted. He shoved his daughter to the side by the wall, then without hesitation started running. In those few seconds when the crowd froze and time slowed down, Mark moved not out of instinct but pain, anger, and the weight of his past. He lunged at the woman, grabbed her by the waist just in time, and threw her hard to the side. A second later, the truck passed right by them, smashing the pavement she had been walking on before crashing into a pole. The metal crash echoed down the street. Windows shattered. People screamed. And then everything went quiet. The woman was still in shock. She collapsed to the ground in Mark's arms. Her eyes were wide open, breathless and shaking. Her jet black hair was all over her face. Fear and admiration mixed in her eyes. Mark asked quietly, "Are you okay?" She looked at him. For the first time, someone wasn't treating her like a CEO or billionaire, just a person. "You saved my life," she whispered. At that moment, Mark suddenly went quiet. He stood up and looked at his daughter once more before reaching out his hand. Lena was crying nearby. Everyone else had their cameras on Mark now. Phones, reporters, even ambulance sirens. All eyes were on the hero. But he just bowed his head. "You owe me your morning coffee," he said softly, took his daughter's hand, and walked away through the crowd. The woman, still kneeling there, asked his name. "What's your name?" "Mark." "Mark what?" But the man had already disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind only a shaken but alive woman and a rescue moment ready to go viral. And the woman, Alexis Becker, CEO of one of the country's biggest media companies, had that morning not only her life saved, but her ability to connect emotionally brought back too. That day, the biggest question in the world was, who was that guy? And Alexis was ready to do whatever it took to find him again. The next morning, the news blew up. Social media was on fire. TV channels kept replaying the moment over and over. The headlines were almost the same everywhere. Unknown dad saves billionaire woman from death. The new generation's real hero. A regular-looking guy saved Alexis Becker's life, then vanished. Alexis was watching that moment again and again from her office on the top floor of a skyscraper. The footage was from a security camera's blind spot, but clear enough. The man was running fearlessly just as the crowd froze, throwing her to the ground at the last second. Alexis's life flashed before her eyes, but there was no panic in Mark's look, just a sense of duty. Her assistants, PR directors, lawyers, they were all in panic mode. Alexis quietly stirred her tea. Her eyes were steady, lips sealed. She was thinking. She'd met a lot of people in her life. The powerful, the rich, the smart. But no one had ever made her feel this human. "We have to find him," she finally said. Her assistant looked surprised. "Who?" "Mark Webber. We might not even know his full name, but I haven't forgotten him. And I won't. Are you going public with this?" "No. I'm going to find him, but on his terms. Because this isn't publicity. This is something else." Meanwhile, Mark was in the back of his small repair shop, fixing an old motorcycle with its silencer off. His hands were greasy, his heart a mess. Everyone wanted to see him as a hero, but he was just a dad trying to do his job. Staying in the shadows, living without being named, wasn't his choice. It was a necessity. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers. Reporters, influencers, fans. He gave them all the same answer. Wrong number. Lena was struggling to understand all this. At school, teachers whispered and friends asked questions. "Is your dad really that guy?" The little girl just kept her head down, drawing stars in her notebook. That night, after putting Lena to bed, Mark opened an old box. Inside was a rusty badge, Senior Mechanical Aviation Technician. He used to have another life. Even if it wasn't another name, he had a different identity. And he'd buried it, along with his wife. Years ago, as a heavy shadow from the past fell over him, someone knocked on the front door. Mark opened it to find a man in a suit. He held a black envelope. His eyes weren't threatening, but there was a side of him that demanded answers. "Mr. Webber?" Mark didn't answer. "This letter was sent to you by Alexis Becker." He handed over the envelope. Then, without another word, he walked away. Mark put the envelope on the table. He didn't open it that night, but the next morning, it was still there. And inside was the first line of a new story. The envelope was still sitting on the table. No logo, no address, just 2 words neatly handwritten. Mark Webber. Mark stared at the envelope while sipping his morning coffee. Just looking at it felt like shaking hands with the past. Finally, he took a deep breath, opened it, and turned over the single letter inside. The paper was thick and fancy, but the writing was simple and heartfelt. "You saved my life. But this letter is more than just a thank you. I'm curious about you. Who you are. Why you disappeared. This isn't a job offer. It's a continuation of an encounter. I just want to meet one more time. If you agree, I want to personally give you what's yours." Alexis, Mark's throat tightened. The part about "what's yours" kept spinning in his head. What did she want to give? A thank you? A check? Or something more? But mostly, he wondered, why would someone like her want to see him again? At the same time, a more complicated scene was unfolding in Alexis's office. Her personal assistant had documented everything she could find on Mark in digital archives and public records. Former workplace, an aviation company. Specialty, thermal stability engineering. Note, left suddenly. No details given. "This guy's not ordinary," Alexis said quietly. "He might be a single dad raising his daughter alone, but the reflexes he showed when that truck came, that kind of reflex isn't just luck." Her assistant was silent. She'd gotten used to Alexis turning this into a personal obsession. But Alexis's eyes were sharper than ever. "There's something in his past," Alexis added. "And this time, I want to know, not just out of curiosity, maybe because of my instincts." Right then, Lena came home from school, holding a torn notebook. Mark opened the door, and his daughter's face was downcast. "What's wrong?" he asked. Lena handed him the notebook. There was a drawing inside. Mark jumping away from a truck with a woman beside him. Written behind it, "My dad is a hero." But the note below, written in red pen by a teacher, was even more striking. "Are you sure this story is true, Lena? You have a big imagination, but it's important not to exaggerate reality." Mark's face tightened. His daughter's eyes were full of tears. "I'm not lying, Dad." Mark crouched down to her eye level. "I know. It's not your imagination. Your heart is just huge. But sometimes, people don't want to believe what they can't see." That night, after Lena was asleep, Mark picked up the letter again. This time, he didn't just read it. He wrote back, "Dear Alexis, I understand your curiosity, but I didn't have to know who you were to save your life. What I did was what any father would do. I'm neither a hero nor a project. But if you still want to meet, it'll be on my terms. No cameras. A quiet place. Just us. I have things to tell you. And if you're brave enough to listen, come." Mark Webber. He folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and first thing in the morning, mailed it. But that letter wasn't just an invitation to meet. It was also the first key opening a door to a past that had been silent for years. And Alexis didn't yet know what she'd find behind that door. The meeting didn't happen in some fancy five-star hotel lobby, Alexis suggested. It was on Mark's terms, in a quiet corner of a park, on a simple wooden bench where no one paid attention. No guards, no press. Just two people. Two tired souls carrying a lot from their pasts. Mark had arrived early. He'd pulled up his jacket collar and kept his hands in his pockets. Alexis was surprisingly casual, no heels, no jewelry. She'd even taken off her glasses. For the first time, she'd come just as a woman. Not as a CEO, but as a person. When Mark saw Alexis approach, he gave a slight nod. "You kept your word," he said. "Nothing less would have done," Alexis replied. Then she hesitated. "And I came because there are things I need to hear." They sat quietly. For a few seconds, all that could be heard was birdsong, leaves rustling in the wind, and distant kids laughing. Mark started speaking, his voice muffled but clear. "I was an aerospace engineer. Worked on thermal balance and engine stabilization. We were a small but passionate team with big dreams and limited resources until that day came." Alexis swallowed her questions and let him talk. "During test flights, I noticed overheating patterns in the engine block under heavy loads. I reported it, over and over, but the answer was always the same. Investors approved the schedule. Just get back to the books." Mark's fingers curled into fists. 2 months later, that plane crashed. 39 people died. One of them was my wife, Anna. She was on board that day because it was our wedding anniversary. And for the first time, we happened to be on the same flight as her company. Alexis covered her mouth, eyes wide. 6 weeks after my report, the manufacturer quietly changed a protocol. No news stories, no lawsuits. Because everyone, including me, was silenced. I was fired. My emails deleted. My office badge revoked. My entire career went down with that plane. The words hung heavy. For the first time, Alexis realized she wasn't listening to a savior, but to the heart of a wreck. Lena was only 3. She didn't even understand why her mother never came back. After that, I stuck to repair work. A simple, quiet, invisible life. I forgot nothing, forgave nothing. But at least when I look into her eyes, I can say I lived honestly. Alexis met his gaze without looking away, then gently said, "And then, when that truck came barreling toward me, you still didn't flinch." That reflex wasn't just a dad's reflex, Mark. It was a man reclaiming his past. Mark looked up at the sky. "Maybe, but I never wanted to be a hero. I just didn't want anyone to lose someone they loved." Alexis stood up and slowly pulled a small box from her pocket. On it was written, "Vega Report, 326. Mark's hands trembled as he touched the box. It felt like opening a concrete-sealed grave he hadn't seen in years. "How did you find this?" he whispered. "Digital archives. An old system, deleted but not completely. I saved it thanks to a connection. This box holds a sealed copy of the original report. And if you're ready, this might not just stay between us." Mark stared at the box for a long time, then slowly nodded. "Not yet, but maybe soon." Alexis smiled. "Then let's wait for that time together." And in that moment, they both realized this was no longer a story about a savior, but about two people standing up together. A few days after their meeting, Mark was working in his repair shop like usual. From the outside, nothing seemed different. Greasy hands, the sound of hammers, muffled music playing from an old radio. But inside, a quiet revolution was brewing in his mind. That box Alexis had brought was still in the desk drawer. He hadn't taken it out, but he had looked at it over and over, ran his hands over it, but never opened it. He carried the weight of the past not just in his heart, but in his eyes, his shoulders, and in the mirrors he didn't dare look at after Lena went to bed at night. And that night, Alexis came back. She walked in alone through the shop door. No fancy car, no guards, no makeup, just a coffee thermos and an old folder. "This time, I'm here with an offer," she said. Mark wiped his hands and looked at her without squinting. "Alexis, I still dash. Just listen," she interrupted. "This isn't a job. Think of it as a fix-up project. Like engineering repair." Mark raised his eyebrows. "We're launching a new tech development project. Quiet, clean, and efficient propulsion systems. But this time, no showy projects. Real engineering. Real goals. And we need someone to lead it who has integrity bigger than their brains." Mark nodded. "You want me for character, not just engineering skills?" "Yes," Alexis said. Because I know you haven't forgotten engineering. But honesty, that's rare to find and keep. Mark smiled. I have conditions. Like, I work from home. Office visits 3 days a week. And I never appear in front of cameras. Without hesitation, Alexis held out her hand. Deal. At that moment, Lena came in through the door, backpack on her back, holding a project folder from school. She smiled excitedly when she saw Alexis. You're back. Alexis bent down and looked at Lena. I saw your rocket design. It was really impressive. Lena blushed. I learned from my dad. Alexis turned to Mark and whispered, sometimes a kid's words break down all defenses. But that night, after Lena was asleep, Mark opened the box. Inside wasn't just a report. There was also an audio recording. An old dictaphone. Date, 9 days before the crash. Mark pressed play, and his wife's voice echoed. Mark is right. This system isn't safe. But no one's listening to his warnings. If there's even a chance, I'm thinking of changing my ticket. But I'll decide at the last minute. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe nothing will happen this time. But what if it does? Mark couldn't get up from his seat. That voice was a live recording of what he'd heard in his head for years. A confession that confirmed what was in his heart. He wasn't alone. And now, only one question remained. Was this truth just to ease his pain? Or was it big enough to shake the world? In that moment, he made his decision. He texted Alexis. This can't stay just between us anymore. Tomorrow, we're not going to the press, we're going to court. With all the evidence. There was no press conference. No cameras were called in. Instead, Mark and Alexis handed over all the documents directly to an independent audit board, the Ethics Committee, and the Aviation Safety Authority. Original reports, audio recordings, documents, all finally saw the light of day after years. This wasn't a leak, it was a confession. For Mark, and for everyone the system had forgotten. That day, the garage was quiet. But even the silence was tense. Lena was drawing in a corner, Mark was going through incoming emails, and Alexis was at the next table, scanning legal papers and talking to lawyers when needed. Words were few between them, but the bond was growing stronger. This was now the foundation of a relationship, a partnership in struggle, and a future. Finally, the first headline broke. 8-year-old plane crash reopened. Former engineer returns with evidence. Then the second wave came. Company executives ignored safety warnings willfully. Alexis Becker supports former engineer amid scandal. The news brought both praise and threats. Alexis's shares started to fall. The board pressured her. Stay away, don't talk to media. But Alexis gave an interview. With just one sentence, she changed the narrative. Some people build companies. Some build consciences. What Mark Webber taught me is this. Power isn't meaningful just when you can speak, but when you stand for the truth. The press went crazy, but Alexis didn't care. Because that night, Lena wrote a letter to her dad and slipped it under his pillow. When Mark found it the next morning, tears welled in his eyes. These were the words from his daughter's pen. Your superpower isn't flying, Dad. It's not being afraid to fall. And I think the greatest heroism is choosing what's right, even when others are wrong. After reading that letter, Mark stood quietly in front of his wife's photo for the first time and said, It's over. I'm no longer just someone who lost you. I'm someone who honors you. Months later, the garage had turned into a training workshop. Mark was volunteering lessons to young engineering students. Lena was designing rockets for kids in the workshop, and Alexis was forming investment partnerships for next-gen energy projects. The center, called Webber Becker Initiative, opened as the first engineering academy built not just on technology, but on ethical principles. Its slogan, just because something works doesn't mean it's right. Just because it's quiet doesn't mean it's innocent. On opening day, Alexis and Mark took the stage together. In the crowd, Lena waved proudly from the front row. Mark took the mic and spoke slowly. I was just a mechanic. But the hardest repairs aren't outside, they're inside us. We can build a new world from broken pieces. As long as one person, just once, can say, this can't go on. And when one dares, another realizes they're not alone. The room went silent. The applause was delayed by a few seconds, because the audience was crying. And that applause wasn't just for a speech, but for a man who wouldn't stay silent, a woman who stood by him, and a little girl who proudly said, That's my dad. In the last scene, Lena wrote in her diary, One day you told me, heroes don't wear capes. You were right. Sometimes, All it takes is a dad with a greasy jacket but a pure heart. And the sign above the garage was now renewed. It read, Weber and Becker, New Beginnings Workshop for Lost Consciences. And the story didn't end there. It just stopped in the right place.